Weirdings is made possible by listeners like you. Send us your bizarre, your creepy, and true stories, either as a written account or as an audio file, to stories@weirdings.com.
Said I saw 3 black shadows come around the corner of the building, and my heart started throbbing.
I was too scared to get up and run, and then I felt the pressure on my arm.
And I could feel its breathing. It was that close. I could feel the heat of its breath.
It was like an orange circle, like a set this,
and it was lit up,
oval, sideways oval,
and it was above the schoolyard over our house
and the woods where there was no houses. There were just woods back there.
And you're like, oh my God.
I've never asked anyone about it. I never asked the landlords about the apartment or anything because I felt if I dug into it, something else would happen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of Weirdings.
Hello, hello, hello.
I'm Jonathan Barrett.
And I'm Colin McMillan.
This episode, we have a lot of interesting stories for you. Our focus this week is haunted graveyards.
That's right, spooky resting places of the dead.
We start off with a story from Luke describing a harrowing encounter. Colin personally visits one of the most haunted cemeteries in Michigan. And we
dun, dun, dun.
And we tie things up with a bit of history of one of the most famous haunted graveyards in the United States, as well as a strange story of experiences from a listener who actually went there.
Oh, sounds nice and spooky, but also very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got a wonderful story from our contributor, Luke, today, which we'll get started on that. Before we do, I just want to remind everybody that we always want to hear from you, our listeners. We want your submissions. We want your spooky stories. And you know, the content of them, the subject matter does not matter as long as it's something that spooked you out. If you believe it, we're ready to believe you, like the Ghostbusters. That came out by accident, but you know what I'm saying. So please keep those stories coming. They are the lifeblood of Weirdings, and we just love them so much.
Absolutely.
So Johnny, if you're ready.
I am. Should we start with the news from the internet?
Should we start with the news from the internet? Yes, we should. I'm very excited today, you guys. I'm just plowing forward. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine because I'm excited to get to this story too because it's very close to home for me.
I can imagine, or rather, I hope that the listeners at home are as excited and get as fired up about the beginnings of each Weirdings episode as I do. Although, if they're in their car, I can see them just like hitting the gas and just plowing through their garage doors and everything.
A new episode of Weirdings is out. Let's go!
Yeah, if they're going about their daily commute like I go about the beginning of these episodes, they probably are going to have some very expensive repairs on their hands. Okay, let's hear the news, John.
All right. Chicago is no stranger to the paranormal, but there's been something lately that has caught the local news outlets by surprise. August was a record month for some unusual sightings in and around the part of downtown that borders Lake Michigan. People have been reporting a large bat-like humanoid flying around the skies, launching itself off high-rises.
What?
Yes. As of the second week of August, there were reported 29 sightings. One was reported by a police officer and independently confirmed by a local resident. As of September 20th, the sightings have climbed to roughly around 41 independent accounts.
Whoa.
Reporting interest has dropped since then, but there has been one local paranormal researcher, Lon Strickler, who is still collecting sightings and has created an interactive map where you can view where the sightings occurred, as well as read about any relevant details. We'll be sure to add a link in the show notes. The first officially reported sighting occurred on July 20th at 5 p.m. by 4 people driving down Lakeshore Avenue. However, rumored sporadic sightings of a similar creature can be tracked as far back as 2011. After the sightings in July, reports of the creatures became more prevalent. And due to the consistency of the reports, we have a pretty fair idea of what this thing looks like. It's about 7 feet tall, black in coloring, humanoid-shaped, contains some human features with a sizable wingspan. Its flight patterns and wing shape have been described as bat-like, and it seems to follow natural flight patterns, being seen to bank, dive, and glide. Of course, Chicagoans refer to it as the Batman.
Well, yeah.
Well, one can only hope that the city of Chicago has actually somehow inherited Gotham's most famous superhero. If any solid evidence of this creature gets brought forth, the truth is bound to be much stranger.
Wow.
Yep, we have Batman.
Yeah, you have a Batman, and he's a bat, man.
The frustrating thing about this is that no one has come forth with some clear pictures of this creature, which is always rough in a time with cell phones.
Yes.
Even though everybody says that, people are always walking around looking at their phones all the time and not interacting with the world. And while my evidence is anecdotal, I don't actually think that's true. I think it's really rare if you're ever moving around downtown or you're in a car that you actually have your cell phone at hand ready to snap a photo. Mm-hmm. I don't find that the cell phone age is a valid argument against being able to capture photographic evidence of the supernatural, because there's just a lot of times when if somebody's having a paranormal experience, the cell phone is the furthest thing from their mind.
Well, and you can't say that paranormal stuff doesn't exist just because people don't have cell phone pictures of it.
Right.
That's a little silly. It's not very scientific for one thing, but to say, well, obviously somebody would be able to take a picture of a weird thing if a weird thing existed in the world, and because there are no pictures, it does not exist. That's just foolish.
Right.
Now, who knows about this Chicago Batman? I'd love to see a picture. I'd like to draw a picture of it.
That's the thing. That's what I want. That's what I wish we had a picture of him, because I am really curious. Does it look like Batman? Or does it look like Man-Bat?
Right. Does it look like a giant bat, or does it look like Batman? I mean, and I don't know which I want more, honestly.
Yes.
Because let's just say it was a guy who made a functional Batman suit and he's flying around Chicago. That's freaking awesome.
Yes, absolutely. That's awesome.
But if it's a giant 7-foot bat, that is also awesome.
Mm-hmm. If this is just a giant humanoid shaped bat creature, I'm cool with that. If this is Batman, I'm cool with that. If this is a gargoyle, though, I am not cool with that.
Yeah, no, that's not okay. We can't have stone gargoyles coming to life and flying off of the top of buildings in Chicago. I'm not very comfortable with that.
No. So, Colin, I understand that you got a tale from a listener for us.
That's right. Our contributor this week is named Luke, and he sent me a story that's actually a bit different than anything we've had on the show yet. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Do you believe in signs? Do you believe that the things to come can be shown to us in the present? Have you ever witnessed something that filled you with dread for what the future may hold? We're never quite sure what the signs may be trying to tell us, or indeed if they are even signs at all. Our contributor, Luke, from Chicago, Illinois, tells a tale from his youth in which he witnesses what might be a chilling omen. Luke's story came via our Facebook, so while they're his words, it's my voice you'll be hearing. When we were teenagers, my friend Sarah and I were playing with a Ouija board. It was late, maybe 4 in the morning, and we thought maybe we could spice up the experience by going outside to a dark spot in my yard. We set up some candles and got to the business of creeping ourselves out. I don't remember what we were asking the thing, but after some time, 2 large black dogs jogged up to us from the shadows. They were friendly dogs and looked identical to each other. They weren't black labs, but they had similar features, with longer snouts than you'd expect a lab to have. The pair sat parallel to each other and just sort of watched us for a while before bounding away again. My friend suddenly gets very spooked. Black dogs, Sarah says. An omen of death. Visibly shaken, she had had enough of mysterious dogs, Ouija boards, and darkness, so we called it a night. Inside, we goofed around and sang our favorite songs until falling asleep. I woke up early because there had been some commotion in the house. My mother was crying at the dinner table, and when I asked her what was wrong, my stepdad chimed in. "It's Dawn," he said. "She died last night." Dawn was a friend of my mom and stepdad's. I didn't know her well, but my mom had found her dead in her van parked in front of the house earlier that morning. Dawn had parked 8 feet away from the spot we were playing Ouija only hours before, 8 feet from the spot where Sarah had named the omen. Dawn had arrived at our house mysteriously that morning. We are not sure why she came to our home so early, but after she parked on the street outside, she went into a diabetic coma and died some hours later. My mother found her there the next morning. A series of coincidences? Maybe. Maybe not.
Holy cow.
Is that spooky or what?
That poor lady.
I know. I know. We've had a lot of, stories that are, I think I saw something stories, but this is like actual death.
We haven't talked about premonitions yet.
Mm-mm.
And that's something I'm sure we're going to visit later, but premonitions have always been such an odd thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's why they have these sort of omens like the black dog. Like, that's why it's a thing, because this has happened like this before, And shoot, it was even in a Harry Potter book, this is a well-known sign.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not saying that every time you see a black dog that somebody's going to die. You can go buy a black lab puppy and have a very happy household, But in this case, it's like these dogs just come out of nowhere, just hang out for a minute and then leave. And then that happens. It's sort of like, wow, it's hard to ignore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Luke's story spooked me for sure. And we just can't thank you enough, Luke, for contributing, because that is really some stuff to think about.
Yeah, that is a great story, Luke. Thank you.
All right. So now it's time to move into the meat and potatoes of our haunted graveyards, because we, believe it or not, we do have haunted graveyard stories in our haunted graveyard episode. We've talked about Batman, we've talked about omens of death, and now it's time to actually talk about haunted graveyards. We're going to start out with a segment about a haunted graveyard not far from where I live. It's a very famous and famously haunted graveyard called the William Ganong or Butler Cemetery. Tucked away in a little corner of Westland, Michigan, between a trailer park and Section 8 housing, there lies a little pocket of local history. Along a winding section of Henry Ruff Road, behind an overgrown chain-link fence, the quiet, hilly landscape of the William Ganong Cemetery waits. I had heard of these legendarily haunted grounds many times over the years, so to investigate, I went there myself.
You ready? All right. Let's see what's out there.
Well, not exactly by myself. You might catch a little bit of my wife, Jessie, on the recording too. I needed her to hold my hand because I am afraid of everything.
10:46 p.m. And let's see if there's anything out there. You lock your door?
There have been plenty of stories about the Ganong Cemetery, or as it's better known, Butler Cemetery. Rumors say that strange noises can be heard at night, such as weeping or the giggling of children. Investigators report a pervasive bad feeling in the area, and in some cases altercations with the locals. Needless to say, our trip there required the more timid of us, me, to pluck up our courage.
What's this little light over here?
Some of the graves, we put a little light out. It's a traditional thing where in case they were to ever rise again, they'd have a light out back on here.
I saw a person over there.
So have you noticed?
Oh yeah, I see. Oh man. This was a terrible idea.
Even late at night, the gates of Butler, with their rather imposing lettering, stand wide open. A simple trail, unpaved, just wide enough for a car, stretches in a crescent from one entrance to the other exit. The cemetery is surprisingly small, with one end easily visible from the other. The ground is uneven and soft, grassy and hilly. The place is very green and almost seems alive.
So, what we're seeing here is this place is really like barely the size of a football field, from what we can tell. Unless we're like really dumb and not seeing the whole place. Okay, we're going up a hill now. Ooh, watch your step. I thought I heard something over there.
Flowers and flags still decorate some of the graves. There are certainly souls here who have not been forgotten.
What do you think? There's a forest on one side, there's a trailer park on the other side, and there's a trailer park on the third side. Oh shit, that flag just scared me though.
Many strange sightings have happened at Butler Cemetery, but none occurred in the time that we visited. One element that we did witness, however, is a very thick mist that hangs in the area and nowhere else nearby. It gives the area around Butler a mysterious, eerie feel and invites the hair on the back of your neck to stand on end. We didn't spend long at Butler, but I'm glad we went. Perhaps a braver soul would have stayed longer to see what spirits came out. Would you?
Okay, well, Butler Cemetery, thanks for your time, and sleep well.
Yep, that was my adventure to Butler Cemetery with my intrepid wife, who is my big brave dog when I have to go out to scary places. So, now, I did not have an encounter when I was at Butler, but I think that we should talk about all the people who have, because there is a wealth of stories about weird stuff and spooky stuff going on at Butler.
Oh, yeah.
Most notably, that's right, she's back, the woman in white. We've talked about the woman in white on Weirdings before, and there is one that has appeared to several people at Butler Cemetery. The road, Henry Ruff Road, that leads where the cemetery is located, has a particularly kind of a, I don't know, is steep the right word? Like a steep curve on the, not like a hill. You know what I mean? It's a pretty severe curve, you know?
Yeah.
Such that when you're going into the curve from one side, you really can't see the end of it on the other side because of the way that housing and the fence and the vegetation in the area are. It's kind of a blind curve.
Yeah, like a sharp curve. That's the word.
Yes, thank you, a sharp curve. And numerous people have reported seeing a woman in white wandering on the side of the road there. And this curve has been the site of so many accidents that they call it the bad curve. So you've got people getting hurt and dying on this curve because they see a woman in white, which is supposedly a specter that lives in the cemetery. Now, you know a lot about Butler as well, isn't that right?
I lived not too far from it for a while. Never had never really visited because I, too, am a scaredy cat. The Woman in White is one of the more popular tales I've heard. I've heard tales where people have hit that point in the curve where it's by the cemetery, and she has actually walked out of the cemetery and into the middle of traffic, which is the source of most of the accidents there. Mm-hmm. But that is just the tip of the iceberg with Butler.
Yes, and there's a lot of rumors that the bodies there were not actually put to rest properly, shallow graves and things like that. So some people have reported seeing remains unearthed, and the rumor is that the dead there are not resting peacefully.
Yes, there was actually a pretty famous account of someone investigating that cemetery in the late 70s. She went by the name of Grundella, I believe.
Oh, yes.
And she actually went there after a storm had apparently unearthed several of the caskets because they were buried so close to the surface.
Right. And if I'm remembering correctly, Grundella the Witch, she wrote a book about it, right? It's part of her Michigan Hauntings book, right?
That is correct.
Yes. And her real name escapes me at this time, but you can still find that book if you just Google Grundella the Witch, she'll come up. And while I was out there, though, looking at Butler, when we're driving through the mist that I mentioned, because that's another thing that everybody reports the mist, and it is certainly there. That is one thing we definitely saw. The mist, it's thick, it comes out of nowhere, and it's only in that area. It was not a foggy night. It just happened to be foggy right there. And there happened to be an actual real person walking on the side of the road in the mist, and I was like, "Wah!"
Oh, that would have been terrifying.
It was terrifying, although they were wearing a black tracksuit, so I'm pretty sure it wasn't the woman in white. But I was like, holy shit!
Yeah.
I couldn't help it. Yeah, Butler's a spooky place, and there's just a ton of spooky activity reported in the area. I'm thinking what I might have to do, if I can really get brave again, is I might have to seriously like get a case of beer, go there and just sit on a gravestone and chill out in the graveyard and wait for something to happen.
Well, how long were you actually there?
I am a big fraidy cat, so I will say not very long.
All right. Well, I'll let you have that one. But yeah, I mean, from most of the accounts that I've read, if you want a series of really good accounts, the Southeastern Michigan Ghost Hunting Society, which is a mouthful, but on their website, Butler is one of those areas that they do pretty much annually. And while I've had a chance to talk to them, I haven't actually attended one of their trips. So maybe that might be something that you might want to try, Colin. It'll be a little bit safer to be there with a big group.
I think if I had to do it again, I would schedule something with a group. And Southeast Michigan Ghost Hunting Society, and also there's another group that does Butler visits called Michigan Paranormal Research Society. So if you wanted to see an area like this, I would recommend get involved with a group like that, contact them and see if they're going, and then maybe tag along. I'm definitely glad that I went, even though I'm afraid of everything. So every time I go to any place that's supposed to be haunted, which is like, I think this was my third time trying to go to a haunted place, I'm always just scared. Like I got scared of a flag.
Hey, I would too if the mood was right.
And Jessie's not helping because she's like, I don't know if you noticed, but that flag was being moved by the wind, but the bush behind it was not. And I'm just like, stop!
Well, you always want to make sure that you're going with somebody who can really ratchet up the fear, right?
Yes. Someone who can make you more scared than you already are. Butler Cemetery, super cool. Certainly worth at least a Google search. Look it up, check it out.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back with more haunted graveyards.
Hey everyone, while John and I love researching interesting stories for the show, our favorite part is the listener contributions. We want to make sure to thank our contributors and let you know how to reach us with your stories. The best way to reach us is via a message through our Facebook page or contact us via email at stories@weirdings.com. We accept written accounts or recorded audio files. Be sure to tell us how you want to be credited, for instance, by your name or anonymously. If you'd rather set up a time to be interviewed by one of us, send us a message with a date and time and the best way to reach you. We prefer audio-only Skype, but other methods are available to us. We take extra care when editing our submissions not to reveal any personal information unless you ask that it be included. And we promise the submitted content is always presented in the spirit in which it was given. Thanks again, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us.
Yes, we are back now. John, I understand you have got another haunted cemetery to talk about. Is that right?
That's right. It happens to be one of the more famous ones in the United States, Bachelor's Grove. Widely known as one of the most haunted cemeteries in America, Bachelor's Grove has inspired quite a few tales of weird happenings, strange visitations, and bizarre encounters. It's a favorite spot for many paranormal researchers to cut their teeth on, both amateur and professional, and it's almost guaranteed that if you visit, you'll come away with one story or another. The cemetery is located near the southwest Chicago suburb of Midlothian, just on the edge of Rubio Woods Forest Preserve. It's on the edge of a small island of forest, and the cemetery itself can be quite a challenge to find as there is no direct path to it anymore, just a faded trail easily missed. Keep in mind, if you plan a nightly visit, the preserve is patrolled by police as it is technically closed. It's generally recommended you visit during the day to be above board, however, seasonal ghost hunts and tours are available at night for those of you who would prefer the comfort of a group, and not have to worry about getting caught trespassing. Because the place is so famous, but also old, what little history we have of the grounds is not exceptionally well documented, and due to its legendary status, separating fact from local lore can be a bit challenging. What we do know of the cemetery's history is as follows. It was established as a burial ground in 1844. The land was donated by Samuel Everdeen and continued to see use as burial grounds up until the late 60s, with a few family plots that saw use in the early 80s. While the cemetery had quite a few plots available, not all of them saw use, and it's estimated only 2/3 were ever filled. In the 1960s, a nearby road was closed down, further isolating the cemetery, and shortly afterwards, it started to decay and became subject to vandalism. Here's where fact begins to make way for lore. While there definitely was recorded vandalism such as gravestones getting spray painted, cracked, or in some cases stolen, local legends state that the graves themselves were molested and entire caskets were broken open. It's no surprise that the few reported paranormal encounters began to increase shortly after. That's not to say that the area did not have its fair share of odd reports that occurred well before the late 60s, but whatever oddness was happening before then got significantly worse. Stories of this plot of land go back to as far as the 1870s. Two of the most famous involve the area surrounding the cemetery. On the approach to the cemetery as early as the 1950s, people reported a shimmering farmhouse visible through the trees that would disappear upon approach. In the nearby pond at the rear of the cemetery, people witnessed a farmer and his plow horse emerging from stagnant waters, crossing the grounds before disappearing in the forest. More modern sightings include a whole range of encounters, such as traditional orbs or ghost lights, bizarre gibbering whispers, white ladies, spontaneous recording equipment failures, and strange shapes in the shadows. To tie this up, I reached out to redditor cameroniodilbert to see if he'd be willing to share a first-hand experience of a time when he and his friends decided to conduct their own investigation of the famous cemetery. Cameron is a semi-regular contributor to Our Paranormal, and his work is always great. He graciously agreed to share his account. As this is a written account, it's my voice you'll be hearing, but the words are his. For my second trip, I went with two friends, one who had been there with me on the last trip. This time, a lot of things happened, and needless to say, we are now convinced about a lot of things we were told about this place. We arrived around 9:15 p.m. at night and left around 10:45. It had rained during the day and there was some residual lighting when we arrived. A few key things we noted from our trip. There were no animals in the forest or cemetery, only some beetles and gnats. There were many lightning bugs across the creek and in the other areas, but not in the cemetery grounds. The brush is not that high or thick in many places, making it not too difficult to see if there are animals. It's strangely quiet and unsettling in these woods. Now we went to investigate, and we were skeptical of many of the accounts of the place and wanted to test the validity of the haunting claims. We had taken many pictures and recorded some audio. We didn't pick up any audio, but we did get some interesting mist that wasn't present while we were there in the pictures. While we took them, we also held our breath to make sure that we wouldn't interfere with any photos. The entire time it seemed like something was following us. We would hear what sounded like footsteps in the woods behind us, separate from the dripping of the rain from the leaves. This happened on many occurrences, and when something would happen, we would stop, record audio, and sit in the darkness to see what would happen. We didn't catch any voices on the audio, but we heard what sounded like footsteps. One of the pictures in the album we took while we were walking on the path and heard some steps behind us. We took that picture, and there was mist present. I'm very skeptical of photos unless it's hard evidence, and we just found these interesting, not necessarily proof of anything. At one point, it seemed like I had seen a shadow figure move behind a tree, but again, that could be some strange shadow from a flashlight. We were the only ones there that night. However, on two separate occasions we heard a male voice, higher pitched, so possibly younger, maybe around 16 to 18 years of age, and it called out and said, "Hello?" directly in the way that we were walking. This was very nerve-wracking as we had searched the area and found no one there. Farther up, we were standing in an area, and it tried to provoke a reaction, asking if anything was with us, if it could make a noise or do something. After waiting about a minute, we decided to leave, and right as we did this, some plants and branches right in front of us where we had a light shined smashed down and broke and shook very quickly like someone had stomped their foot there. We didn't see any animal as it was about 5 feet away. We paused for about 10 seconds and turned around, and the same thing happened to us in the other direction at the same distance, and then once more in another direction. This really freaked us out as it happened so quickly and out of thin air. We made our way back to the cemetery and went separate directions. My one friend heard the same voice, with running footsteps in the woods saying, "Run, run." However, this was in the clearing area with no one else around, as we would have seen them enter at this point. Shortly after, my friend took a picture, and there appears to be a figure in a robe with black hair and a face staring at him, and it only showed up in this picture. I have the original here and an edited, brightened up version with the possible entity circled. This could have been something like pareidolia or just a camera issue, but it seems separate than any of the other branches. Again, I'm not really sure if this is anything, but we noticed it and thought we'd share. If you'd like to read his account in full, we'll put a link in the show notes. There you'll be able to see the photos of this trip, as well as the one his friend snapped of a possible robed figure in the woods.
Oh, wow. I cannot wait to see those pictures.
Yeah, it's a great story. And the best part about it is it brings up one of many local legends that surround Bachelor's Grove, and that's the Phantom Monks.
Oh.
So, Bachelor's Grove, I mentioned the farmhouse. Mm-hmm. I mentioned the old man with the horse who comes out of a stagnant pond and then crosses into the woods. The legend about him is that his horse was plowing that field, went buck wild, and ran into the river, dragged the horse itself and him into that stagnant pond, and they both drowned because they were wrapped up in the equipment.
Ooh.
The Phantom House, apparently, if you do manage to reach it and you go in, you will never be seen from again.
Oh, man.
And in the 60s, when the road to the cemetery was officially closed and all that bad vandalism started happening. Now, keep in mind, this is before the 80s. Now, the 80s is really when we start seeing upticks of reports of cultish figures. There was a big Satanism scare going on at that time.
Yeah.
In the 60s, not so much. So it was very surprising to see that a lot of people were talking about some of this vandalism expressing itself as strange occult symbols. And who was behind these symbols were people who were dressed in black robes, which eventually became the Phantom Monks. While nobody's actually ever caught these Phantom Monks or caught anybody in robes there as vandals, because the police did for a while actively police that area, and they do so again now. They're still very much tied to Bachelor Grove and do occasionally appear either in photographs or people will have straight out and out encounters with them. They're like a weird ghost version of the Men in Black.
Ooh. That's so interesting.
Yeah, they're unique to the Bachelor's Grove. That's the other thing. Like, everybody knows who the Men in Black are.
Right. But the Phantom Monks only appear in this one place.
Yes, and apparently their whole goal is to get people out of there. Now, the encounters can be everything from, like, showing up and doing spooky things to actually directly engaging with people and telling them that they have to leave, but communicating with them in a way that is not normal.
Huh. So there's no sightings where, like, no, they don't speak to people. They just show up.
Oh, no, they speak to people.
Oh, they do?
Yep.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe the ancient protectors of that sacred land or something.
Could very well be.
And that's so interesting, too, because, you know, when you hear these other ghost stories, the woman in white, you know, woman in white reports come from everywhere. Mm-hmm. I swear, it's like every community somewhere nearby, someone has seen one. But it's really unusual when there's any goofy, weird activity that is just localized to one area. You know,
yes,
that means that it's not just something that sort of lives in the collective unconscious and you could just like imprint it on a weird experience that you had. Like there's something specific about Bachelor's Grove, that makes these monks appear there. You know, that's very interesting.
It's so unique. It's so unique. I've never heard of that type of encounter. Like, okay, so you get UFOs and then you get MIBs, right? Right. So you have a UFO sighting. It's very dramatic. And then 2 days later, somebody shows up at your door and says really weird stuff to you and makes you very uncomfortable. This is the only haunting where I've ever researched where there has been a place where there have been all these strange paranormal sightings. And then there's also these additional figures that show up and basically run you out of there.
Oh, that's so weird. Oh, it's so cool, though. Very cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, everyone, that is all the time that we have today. We do want to thank our contributors for this episode, as well as thank you for listening. So, Colin, what do we have for our listeners next time?
Getting into some really scary stuff, because next week we're talking about demons and demonology and the people who deal with them. And it might be a little scary. This stuff can be pretty intense. So don't miss it. You're going to love it. Next episode is demons. That's all for now.
See you all next time.
Weirdings is produced and edited by Jonathan Barrop and Colin McMillan. Our theme was composed and produced by David Feslian. You can find this track and many more like it at feslianstudios.com. Additional music was provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, Purple Planet Music at www.purple-planet.com, and the Blake Robinson Synthetic Orchestra at syntheticorchestra.com. Weirdings relies heavily on listener contributions. If you would like to provide content for the show, send your written accounts or audio files of you sharing your experience at stories@weirdings.com. You can also contact us through our Facebook page or through the comments on our webpage at weirdings.com. Weirdings can be found on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Facebook, and anywhere podcasts can be found. Tell your friends about us, and thanks for listening.